Good evening, everyone. And we are very honored at the Hearth Within, to have such a beautiful poetic gathering around the hearth. Of course, it is summer, but then summer has given way to monsoons. And we are today celebrating a wonderful book called Countryside by Varsha Singh. I hope the book is visible, though I think there are some problems with my screen. Okay, this is, no, yeah, this is more visible, I believe. So Countryside is Varsha's latest collection of poems. Varsha Singh is a bilingual poet who writes from Dhanbad. She teaches at the Department of English, Guru Nanak College, affiliated to BM Koilanchal University. She is a bilingual writer, bilingual poet, the managing editor of reviews, and her work has been published widely in journals and anthologies. She has edited books of poetry. Most importantly, Varsha is very active. I believe, she practices what we call academic activism and poetic activism in nurturing a wide group of poets. So recently, we have had wonderful poets coming out from the Department of English, Guru Nanak College. And the effort that she puts into nurturing her students is an effort that is rewarding to India and to Indian English writing globally. So we are very happy that Varsha has come out with this wonderful book, which she confesses was sitting on her desk for quite a period of time before she decided to bring it to birth. We are glad that it is here with us. And to celebrate, this first online launch of the book, we have a wonderful panel of speakers, poets, writers who will be sharing their opinions on the book. But before we begin, I would like to call upon Professor Jaydeep Sarangi to deliver the formal welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I thank each and everyone who are present here and joining from different parts of India, making the country smile through poetry. It's really wonderful to see Barsa coming out with the book Countryside. A country's power rests on its vitality in poetry. Poetry through young minds. I think India is shining truly because of the use of English by the English academics and writing from different parts of India and who are still to be considered as young writers. And they are managing English so well that it is almost like writing back to the world. Gone are the days when there is a stigma that Indians cannot write poetry. They can manage something. I know there is a panelist in this particular program. The panelist is from the Gangotri of Indian English writing, Patna. We always call because Indian writing in English started humbly in 1792-93 by Deen Muhammad's travel. And the first three writings, history says, came from Patna. Richa is sitting from Patna. And recently, I came across a brilliant work from Patna. The title of the work is Patna School of Writing. I think through it. My point of referring to Patna is that is Indian writing in English started not from a metro city, but from the countryside. I'm using countryside a little bit in expanded term, and Barsa has taken care of that. After the Indian independence, like cricket, and Indian English poetry was a property mostly from the Maharashtrians, isn't it? If you are not a good friend of Ajit Wadekar or Sunil Gavaskar, it was very difficult to get into the Indian cricket team, though it is hyperbolic. You were general. Similarly, if you are not published in Quest, Nissim Ezekiel's journal, you are not a poet. You are a poet. You write something called poetry. That's why the rise of Jayanta Mahapatras, as I was referred to, in 1971, is an watertight kind of departure, is a kind of departure from the metro buzz and a hub of activities to the democratization of Indian English poetry. From a small town like Cuttack, and he used to edit the journal called Telegraph, and Telegraph became a hotcake for publishing poetry for the Indians. He also started a magazine called Chandrabhaga, which became instrumental in shaping up Indian English poetry. For any good work on Indian English poetry, these magazines and editorials are rich reservoir of materials. I know many academics are sitting here and they will be supervising poetry, they are supervising poetry, they are the poets par excellence and writing from different parts of India, writing with different backgrounds, but writing in English. And English is not may not be mother's tongue, but of course uncle's tongue, isn't it? But uncle's tongue is more prominent than I think the English language used in many Anglophone countries. Very interestingly, I always consider that monolingualism is boredom. So people like us, we are more creative. We have the aroma, which is not possible for a monolingual country. And we are so varied, we are so joyous because the history is so rich for us. Monolingualism, monoculturalism, all are very practically, absurd. When you think of, suppose if you are thrown into a monocultural, monolingual country, all on a sudden you replanted. I don't know. I will die in a couple of months' time without the sap of my works. Therefore, Barsa is one of the products of of multiculturalism and multilingualism. Writing from Dhan and writing in a true color of poetry with true sensibility, I think one of the greatest assets of Barsa is the use of language to perfection. There is nothing called perfection, of course, always a crave for something to design in a new way. All roads are important, and Barsa's way is very unique. I was just reading one of her poems, Life River. And if we look into the Life River poem, page 59, the river which flows alike life, currents living by every age, concurrent, and the grand old lady who still kneels down, each down, teasing, sensing torrents, who bore the fruit of wisdom way back when Shuttavati conceived the truth of where C.T. Narasimha said, Indian writing in English is Indian writing in English when it talks about myth and legends of India. And Shuttavati and Shantanu are contextualized in such a beautiful manner. I think that the poem speaks for itself. It is one of the assets of Barsa. I think the panelists will discuss more about Barsa's poems and they will relate it with other contemporary poets and as well as the readings in Barsa. I want to say that more readings, more into poetry can give a better society. So we need more Barsas and we need more powerful Barsas in the coming days to come. And Barsa is not only a poet, but she can cultivate poetic minds for generations. So we are many professors sitting here. We talk poetry, we write poetry, we deliver talks on poetry. I say we are all the makers of the country. We are the builders of the country. Poetry is a movement. You cannot with your activism through poetry. Poetry is the art of survival. I think poetry is through which we live. There won't be a day where I will be living without poetry. Hope we all will bless each other and cheer for the jills of poetry. Thank you, Barsha. Congratulations. We want to see more fruitful time, even more power to your pen and mind. Thank you. Thank you, all panelists. We are eagerly waiting for your comments, observations, and readings. Thank you and big congratulations. And thank you for
You.
joining Hearth Within. Thank you, Bashudhara, for coordinating it. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful, warm beautiful, memorable preface to this entire program that we're going to begin. And we are very grateful that so many wonderfully poetically inclined people have consented to be a part of today's session. We are especially grateful for the panelists. We are quite unfortunate to not have Sabah Bashir amongst us today. Her family seems to be unwell, and COVID waves have started riding the country once again. And she has been unable to join us on account of being unwell. But we are extremely grateful and delighted that Bhaswati Di, Ravi Shankar sir, and Himanshu sir, are there with us this evening to discuss countryside. We will begin with Bhaswati Ghosh. Bhaswati Ghosh is a writer and translator based in Ontario, Canada. She is the recipient of the Charles Wallace Trust Fellowship for Translation 2009 for her work My Days with Ram Kinkar badge published by Nyogi Books. Victory Colony 1950 is her first book of fiction published by Yoda Press, and it has received some wonderful reviews. I'm personally going through it right now, and I can testify to the depth of memory and artistry that the book contains. Bhaswati Di, we are very, very honored that you have consented to join us. We know that you had a talk just before this, and it's quite hectic for you, but we are very grateful that you could make it to us today. Over to you, Bhaswati Di. You have to unmute yourself, Di.
Still living through the virtual age. Sorry about that. Thanks so much for the warm introduction, Vashudhara, and many congratulations, Varsha. I only caught the tail end of Jaydeep's very illuminating talk. I wish I could be here for the entirety of it, but that was really very illuminating. I am not really an expert on poetry in any sense. I read from the heart, and thankfully, poets like Varsha serve that purpose very well. So I have just some observations that came from the heart, and I want to share them with you all. I want to remain the parenthesis, enter the world as an afterthought, not breathless. For me, these lines from the poem titled Poetry define the poet that Varsha Singh is. I've been following her work and maturity as a poet on social media for quite some time now. And what stands out more than her keen poetic sensibilities is the quietude, the nonviolent gentleness and simplicity that informs that sensibility. While reading Countryside, this assessment was reaffirmed several times for me. Another thing that stood out in this collection was Varsha's ability to say more with less. I found in this act of consistent brevity a quiet rebellion against all the kolahal, the cacophony that seems to have become an inseparable part of our current world order, whether virtual or real. Yet that isn't the only act of rebellion Countryside reflects. It is a complete manifesto of quiet rebellions against patriarchy, against parochialism, against sectarianism, against the biases that keep humans from seeing each other, as well as the non-human world, as part of the same tribe. She has dedicated the book to Papa and Dadi Amma, and I presume that would be her father and grandmother, whom she calls the essential feminists of her life. Varsha writes with fluid ease, and there is rarely a forced expression in her poetic exploration. And just like that, within the scope of a single line, she manages to change the weather of a poem. Consider these lines from Embers, for instance. There was no one, the one who wouldn't write poetry, there was one, the one who wouldn't write poetry, but lived prose and verse, verse and prose. Exiled from the countryside, where she fell in love, loved, and outloved. Varsha's concerns are many, and hers is a voice that doesn't limit itself to the individual or the periphery of the individual's existence, but it extends itself to the road, the highway, the river, and the sky. Nature isn't merely an idea to romanticize for her, not any longer. She nudges us with an alacrity to see the damage and the violence humans are inflicting on the natural world. With strong flashes of eco poetry in the poem River, she writes, Human? She knows now the animal called human has everything minus humanity. She is not angry, she is devastated for her love. She reaches out. The sudden surge, drowning huts, hotels, apartments, cars, bullock carts, airports, industries, mixing everything in their own scum, only to leave no traces of what they ever had, humanity. And yet, this is still not an angry outburst, but an appeal from a wounded and hurt water body. As she exemplifies in this poem, if we thought rivers and mountains and glaciers and forests are mute entities, it not only points to our arrogance, but also to our ignorance. With climate change, these entities are indeed speaking up, as the river does in Varsha's poem. Similarly, she says, what once was the countryside of flower beds is now a roily river of floating deads in mourning. Both the meteor like sharpness and brevity of the poems in Countryside reminded me of Spulingo, Rabindranath Tagore's collection of short verses. More than once, I caught myself reading a certain line or turn of phrase Varsha wrote for a second time. Such was its electric charm. There's a hollow, unlike empty, she says in Windows. And it made me consider the difference between those two states of hollow and empty. And yet, despite the despondency and the sadness, Varsha manages to uncover, with a rare vulnerability, the strength to survive. Her poem, Turning Cacti, ends with these sublime lines. When all is burnt, a thing longs to live, turns in heart, mind, and soul into cacti. And this I feel, this thing that longs to live and turns in the heart, forms the very core of this wonderful collection of poems by Varsha Singh. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak a little about it and to celebrate this beautiful book.
Bhaswati Di, thank you for the very warm, you could say we turned over the pages of the book with you as you spoke about these wonderful poems, and this was also an opportunity to be able to hear you for the first time. Bhaswati Di is a mentor to almost all of us, all of her fellow poets on Facebook, and she routinely engages with everyone, comments on their work, and that matters a lot. She herself is a very, very sensitive poet, though she said that she did not know much about poetry. She is a very, very sensitive poet, and her lines, especially if you come across them on a morning, leave you filled with confidence the day through. So thank you very much, Dee, for that very tender introduction to Varsha's Countryside, an introduction which the book and the poet truly deserve. Thank you very much. We will move over now to Himanshu sir. Himanshu sir, informally at the beginning of the session, he just told us that he has already lost the right to speak on the book because he has been mentioned in the acknowledgements. Himanshu sir, knowing Varsha personally, I would say that no acknowledgement of her work and her life are complete without you. You have played a very important role in nurturing her, and you will be acknowledged whenever and wherever she goes. So you must speak about Countryside, and listening to you will add more layered perspectives to the book. So Himanshu Shekhar Choudhary teaches postgraduate students at the Department of English and also serves as the head Department of Foreign Languages, BBMK University, Dhanbad. He studied English literature at JNU and the University of Delhi, and his areas of academic interest are literature, cultural studies, theory, and translation studies. We are extremely grateful, Himanshu, sir, that you could make time for the Hearth Within and for Countryside this evening, and we are all ears for you. Over to you.
Thank you, Vasudhara ji. Thank you, Jaydeep da. Thank you, Bhaswati di, and all my friends. And I understand some of our students are also on this platform. In his welcome address, Jaydeep Da talked about C.D. Narasimha's understanding of English poetry and the rooted, grounded nature of Indian English poetry when it talks about Indian myths and legends. 2 days back, I was walking the grounds on which C.D. Narasimha must have walked. I was at Dhwanyaloka, Mysore, and Professor P. Srinath, his son, took me to Dhwanyaloka's library. And again, I don't know where it came from. I did not have much time in my hand, and the meeting was not very planned. But he started talking about poetry, and within 5 minutes, he put the responsibility of budding new poets in my part of the country in the languages they prefer to write in the way they prefer or want to write in. Yes, it is very difficult for me to talk about Varsha's poetic art or poetry because I distinctly remember even now when we were traveling to Delhi for the launch of her first book of poems, Deluges, in March. And right now, when she publishes this new volume of poems, she's not the same Varsha Singh. I have seen her struggles, I have seen her failures, but through her failures, as an artist, she rises every time. And this book, The Countryside, is a good example of that. I have seen her going quiet for days on end, for days without end, for not finding the right word or not finding the right cadence of expression to say something new. And that is where, before I talk a little bit about the book itself, I'll talk about the way I have seen her to work around her poems. Because I think she agrees with Jane Hersfield's uh, idea of a poem in his book, in her book called "The Ten Windows: How Great Poems Transform the World," which was published in 2015, and where he says poetry's work is not simply the recording of inner or outer perception; it makes by words and music new possibilities of perceiving. I think this is exactly what Varsha Singh tries to do in her poems, that she is creating new possibilities of perceiving things. She is creating structures, new structures of perception of reality. And we need to do that on daily basis. Otherwise, the reality which is being presented to us may not be the reality that we want to talk about or is possible to talk about. When Bhaswati was talking about that her concerns are immediate, many concerns she reflects in her poems. But that's exactly the point. She does that, but is careful not to spread her butter too thin. I have heard people, I know people who want Varsha to write longer poems. Some people want her to do longer poems and in fact challenge her to do longer poems. But then I think again Bhashwati got it right when she said that she wants to maintain the power of brevity that she is so natural with, and she does it again and again. She does it again and again. The way I deal with her poems, you would be happy to know that we would disagree with even a tense marker in a particular line, and I would read the poem with my own tense marker, and she would write the poem in her own tense marker. I'm talking about the poem Typing Passion, and she has prefaced it with a quotation from Rumi. There is a passion in me that does not long for anything from another human being. And she turns that idea on its head and she says, the keys don't turn smooth, they crackle when I click and turn schizophrenic. Last time, I wanted to type a letter of passion, for there is a passion in me that longs for another human being. But the space broke, and it was a spaceless letter of passion with no room to breathe. It could not be read, for it smelt surveillance, suffocated, confused, restless. Don't they say, what's passion without space? The spaces of passion were always erased, turned homeless, displaced. I refuse to read this poem with the tense marker were. I read this poem with the spaces of passion are always erased, turned homeless, displaced. But I have come to, I have come to, I have learned to live with these small disagreements with her, choice of expression. But that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make. Joydeep Da talked about the monolingual idea of Varsha being bilingual. I don't know, this monolingual thing has happened to me thrice in the last 24 hours. When I was reading the poem called The Swade by Varsha, which begins with one eyed parrot, and Joydeep Da talked about monolinguals. In fact, Professor Harish Trivedi, talking about Red Samadhi on his Facebook page, has written this one-eyed monolinguals. I think it came out yesterday or day before yesterday, right? So Varsha's one-eyed parrot in Swede, Sir's monolingual, and Professor Harish Trivedi's one-eyed monolinguals. They, made a pattern for me, and I thought we can talk about it a bit. One-eyed parrot winks to blindness in hideout from surveyors of masked refuse, while platoons of insomniacs hunt for a spirited conch-eyed bird who would turn their master with one-eyed vision, swear of the universe. Swear, surveyor of the universe. I think Varsha is just not uh, being just not trying to record the inner or outer perception here. She is also preparing for the new kind of perception that we must learn, acquire to be able to uh, capture the world we live in. I'll just read one more poem. C.D. Narasimha also talked about, jokingly though, sometime back, when I was in the audience and he was speaking at the Sahitya Academy, Delhi. He said that Indian religions have their beginnings in our kitchens. I thought gingered aging that Varsha is writing about the poem on page 31. Some bones shiver in winter evenings, urging for tea, the only warm escape with a bit of ginger for some sore throat. Sore amour propre, but the rotten ginger rests like bruised ego, not budging an inch, aged for ages. Not the kind of beginning of Indian religions in the kitchen, but again the idea of creating your metaphors and similes from your own day-to-day existence and being able to create that atmosphere, create that cadence for the poetry. Finally, I want to talk about Varsha as a poet and a translator. I think it's very difficult to separate the two. That's why I think it's a bit of self confession of a poet in this poem, Failing Translator. He fails miserably daily, for he can't translate the broken notes. And I have had my disagreement with this poem because the choice of the pronoun. Why can't it be she? Why does it have to be a he? Right? I'm just leaving these small talks about these poems that I have had with Varsha, right? And making it public. He fails miserably daily, for he can't translate the broken notes which fall from the bosom of tightly knit chords of his music. Restless translator returns every moment to hold the extra mundane sounds in another tongue, but they turn back to their original self with each shift of any other tongue. Here, the poet, the translator, both are not monolinguals, not certainly one eyed monolinguals, but bilinguals who are creating realities for us like Shabda Brahma and preparing us for newer possibilities of perception. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Himanshu sir. That was a very, very engrossing, talk where we could hear because, as I said, hearing from you would have its own advantage. We would move from being, mono-eyed readers of Varsha's work to having more perception, especially from one who has been a teacher, mentor, and is continuously shaping her mind. And it worked well for us because we got to know so many, ideas, especially how a poem is formed in the mind, as you spoke. Thank you very much for enlightening us on countryside and on the process of the birth of countryside. From Himanshu sir, we will move over to Ravi Shankar sir. And we are very grateful that he has consented to be with us this evening. N. Ravi Shankar is a much revered, well-known Indian English poet, translator, short story and scriptwriter from Kerala, author of 2 volumes of poetry, Architecture of Flesh and The Bullet Train and Other Loaded Poems. His poetry is available in German and French translations. He has been a very significant contributor to South Indian literature as a translator. His works include biography, Mother Forest by C.K. Janu, Kerala Tribal Reader, poetry anthologies, Walking is Another Dream, How to Translate an Earthworm, translation of essays. And we are very, very grateful that, we are with translators. Incidentally, I don't think it was planned, but incidentally, we are with translators this evening. We are celebrating Varsha translator herself. We had Bhaswati, who is a translator. Jaydeep sir is extensively working on translation. And so it is also, I think, I'm the only one-eyed monolingual in this gathering, and I'm glad I'm not speaking. I'm just moderating. So, Ravi Shankar sir, we are very glad to welcome you to this evening, and over to you for your observations on countryside. You'll have to unmute. You'll have to unmute, Ravi Shankar sir. I guess we lost him, but I'm sure he'll be joining again. We are having a wonderful time and we are very grateful for the audience. Sonali, a belated welcome to you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Ravi Shankar sir is back, so you'll have to unmute. You're muted. We cannot hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it okay now? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Firstly, thankful to everybody for joining here, and many old faces I'm seeing. Sonali is there, and Bhaswati, Varsha, and many new people. Jaydeep Sarangi sir. I was quite impressed by him talking about this multicultural thing because I am an advocate of that. Having been working in Kerala, I am from Palakkad, and I come from not even a city, a small town in Palakkad. Uh, uh, I do translations a lot, especially translation of poems. So I am very familiar with the poetry scene of Kerala and the poetry scene of Indian English poetry and the poetry scene of Tamil. I speak Tamil also and I translate from Tamil. So I got three kinds of experience in translation, like from Malayalam or Tamil to English, or from English to Malayalam, or from Tamil to Malayalam. And also, recently a new experience came in because one poem of mine, one English poem of mine, titled Silent Farewells, uh, it got popular somehow. I don't know how it got popular in Kerala, where Malayalam is the thing. And suddenly translations began pouring in. And it became a flood. And you won't believe me, I got 112 translations in Malayalam of the same poem and around 20 translations in other Indian languages and six translations from foreign languages. And each of these translations speaks in a different way about this poem, their idea. So it doesn't stick to that poem. It creates another poem or many poems out of that. All these 140 poems I got are different in their own way. And that is how multiculturality works. And I'm glad that Varsha Singh is also working in that same direction, at least from Hindi to English and English to Hindi. Because only then we will know the whole gamut of how culture works and what all kinds of people we can meet and what all things are going on around in the world. Recently, I translated 10 Ukrainian poems after the war started. So this is a continuous process. And in between, I was so glad to see Varsha's book coming in, and she asking me to do do an analysis or do a talk on that along with other uh, important people. I'm not an academician like most of you are, I think.
Uh, Ravi Shankar sir, you have got yourself muted. We just couldn't catch you in these last 2 minutes. Ah, I'm sure he'll be back with us.
It's okay now?
That
Yes,
is,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some problem with the computer here. Anyway,
No issues.
okay. So I was quite surprised to know that Varsha has brought out 4 collections of poetry before, English poetry. I was not aware of that. I thought this was her first collection. So that was my impression. First collection of poetry in English. That is, though I've known her for a pretty long time, and she has done translations of my poems also. Anyway, I went through that book, and I'm happy to note that the way it has been written, uh, it's such a simple language she's using, and uh, each poem is a statement of something or other in our life, and it is it talks about so many things. And it's not normally collections are made with one theme in mind or 1 or 2 themes, but she has been really working on this in a different way. So with that, because I can't talk well, I wrote it down. So I will just read from what I have noted. Um, as a reader, I'm reading. As a reader, I was surprised because there are almost no poems on the countryside, as we understand the term. Collection is named Countryside. We have read many countryside poems, and all of them deal with the hills, rivers, trees, groves, flowers, houses, kitchen, food, and people, which are normally associated with the countryside, which is again uh, a typical uh, perception of the countryside. In her collection, anything remotely connected to to an actual countryside, you'll find two rivers are there. Two rivers. One of which is described like this river. There are 2 poems, but I am reading only one poem. River. Below the hills of a checkered mountain streams a river, uncelebrated. Analogies couldn't define. Why didn't she reach out to seek her identity? This is a small, very small. She writes small poems, very brief, and brevity is their strength, as someone told. Now, this countryside is not a normal countryside. It's immediately clear that Varsha's countryside is not without, but within. It's a countryside within her. They are described as inadequate analogies. Expressing her identity is the intention, but the analogy does not quite work, and they are not meant to work. The poet says that the analogies could not define her need to express her identity. Basically meaning that no analogy works here. That is not her intention. It's not a direct reference to a countryside. It's a countryside within, which is found within herself. In Moonlight, there are so many poems to prove that. In Moonlight, she says, the countryside doesn't look like the country I was born, where birds were free as dreams, where dreams were unalloyed as dew, where love was the sole religion. Again, it's not the countryside. It is her own world within which she is describing. Most of the poems work like this. These poems are meant to convey a sense of thingness, somethingness, everythingness, nothingness. These are words she has used in a poem. And I think her way of working is described by these terms. Thingness, somethingness, everythingness, nothingness. It covers the whole world of her poems. She makes clear in this small poem, Blabber. There's a small poem. Uh, uh, it is in this poem that these words come, that nothingness, somethingness. The poems are meant to convey a sense of somethingness, etc., etc. The theme of an illusory countryside is repeated in many poems. Green doesn't want to be green anymore. It craves to turn blue. The river still flows alike, life, to reach yet another womb, to seed its history anew. These are very complex things to say. The green doesn't want to be green anymore. There's a change needed. There's a change that is craved for. The river still flows like life. The river is flowing like life to reach yet another womb, to seed at history anew. It's both the country, with the world and the history that is uh, he wants to be born anew. What once was the countryside of flower beds is now a roily river of floating deads. What once was the countryside of flower beds is now a roily river of floating deads. A poet can translate the countryside. It's a kind of translation of the geography, the countryside. A poet can translate the countryside into a whole field of thoughts and ideas, and thus we find two poems on translation. They are again not really about translation. This is the beauty of her poems. The titles say something and the body says something else. Though it is connected, translation, the poem for self-translations is about translation, but is not about translation. It's some other kind of translation, and not linguistic translation she is talking about. They're again not really about translation. This Varsha talks about self-translation like cures within her core remain untranslated. Arithmetics of language remain beyond her spell. It's actually a love poem translated in this manner. And in failing translator, the description is like, he fails miserably daily, for he can't translate the broken notes which fall from the bosom of tightly knit chords of his muse. There's a poet looking for his muse, and his inability to know about her, separate himself from her, and inability to join together the broken pieces is known as failing translation. He's a failed translator. A bad poet is a failed translator. So that's something great to talk about, the idea of translation. Now, this is not about translation, but of love. One finds that in Varsha, love is a sublime emotion, hardly expressed. She hardly expresses love as love. and it is suppressed. Love is suppressed. Even in a poem like Love Lost, she writes about something else, not about love. Love Lost, where the fury about that which is red in color, smoking eyes, thumping fist, burning breath, and a self-created halo. Even the stones can turn fluid. Even the stones can turn fluid. It's about love. These are emotions that come out from love. They are expressions of love, but they are described in this manner. These are all expressions and symptoms of love, which uh, which comes to a failed analogy. There is a failed attempt to type the word passion. It's a poem Jaydeep quoted from extensively. Please note that there is no real passion, but an analogical love. Again, it's an analogy. Uh, the keys don't run smooth. They crackle when I click and turn schizophrenic. Last time I wanted to type a letter of passion, for there is passion in me that that longs for another human being. This is the closest Varsha comes to expressing her desire for a man, another man. So there is a passion in me that longs for another human being. But the space broke and there was a spaceless letter of passion with no room to breathe. That happens when she types the word passion on a typewriter. Invariably, most women poets writing in English have a Kamala Das written hidden within her psyche. It's so in Malayalam, Tamil, in almost all languages I have found there's a Kamala Das. For us, we call her Madhavi Kuti as a writer of short stories. And she has not written a single poem in Malayalam. All her poems are in English. So there is a Kamala Das hidden within her psyche. One Varsha is no exception. She has a poem about Kamala Das. There is a poem titled Kamala Das in the collection. Here what is expressed is straightforward. Varsha tells plainly that the Kamala Das who is within her core travels from women to women, though she lives within her too. This Kamala Das is not something stationary. She lives in Varsha and passes on to other women too. So Kamala Das becomes an idea to be passed around. She do let me know if she comes along your core. Let her know she lives in my words, in my prose. This is an appeal to other poets to whom Kamala Das has gone. Do let me know if she comes along your core. Let her know she lives in my words and in my prose too. Now, no poet can avoid a poem about poetry itself. I have written about poetry. So naturally, Varsha has to write about poetry. So true to her fashion, it won't be about poetry. So that one can be assured of. Poetry. It's not that I am thoughtless, voiceless. There is a stampede of thoughts, restless, and who want to be lost. I want to remain the parenthesis, enter the world as an afterthought, not breathless. Now, there is a poem which Bhaswati quoted. Uh, there's a stampede of thoughts within Richa. Her mind is restless and she doesn't want to be lost, and she wants to remain at least the parenthesis and enter the world as an afterthought and not breathless. So even that poetry becomes something else, like her countryside. His poetry is also converted to something which is not poetry, but it is also poetry. This explains why she writes her poetry the way it is written. He wants to enter the world not as a processed product, but as an afterthought. So her poetry is not a complete product which she is bringing out to the world. It's a kind of afterthought after the main thought has passed by. Uh, the poem Postscript, that's the last poem in this. In the poem Postscript, she elaborates this. Her poems need no word, forward, or afterword, for they are words in verse. Her poems need no word, forward, or afterword, for they are words in verse. Basically, her poems are thingness, somethingness, everythingness, nothingness. So that's what she writes about. And thank you, Varsha, for allowing me to make an analysis of this book and being a cause to read such good poetry. Such brief poems one doesn't come across nowadays. Uh, People write short stories as poems, but you don't. It's a real poetry that is at work within you. And thank you for that. Thank you, Vasudha. Thank you, Jaydeep Sarangi sir.
So much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richa. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Vasudha, next.
Thank you, Ravi Shankar sir, for that very, very pertinent and very thoughtful analysis of the poems that you did. You know, uh, you drew our attention to several layers of meaning that we might have skipped otherwise. And you're very right in pointing out the very delicate evasions that Varsha practices in her poetry and the metaphors that she uses to kind of find a way between the cracks and disappear between the metaphors that she has chosen. For example, space, is a metaphor in itself, and the idea of using the key, the computer key of space for the idea of space is itself, I believe, a very significant metaphor. So thank you for drawing our attention to these minute, presences in her poetry. And now we will turn over to the poet herself to know from Varsha, what she thinks of countryside, to give her an opportunity to thank the speakers who have, unraveled so many layers of the book, and also to talk a little about, though we, of course, we are teaching postmodern criticism and we are teaching, the death of the author and the birth of the text. I don't believe that as authors, as writers, we can ever agree to a condition where the authorial voice completely disappears. So over to the birth of the author, as a new text is born. So over to you, Varsha.
Thank you, Vasuti. To begin with, I'm very much thankful towards Jaydeep sir. Thank you, sir, for first of all bringing the idea of the Hearth Within. It is beautiful the way the Hearth Within has been bringing out events after events. It has been inspiring, and I've been trying to keep connected with the events that you have been organizing. And Vasuti, these two people have been the prime factor behind me, behind my writing continuously, basically. So they have been pushing me, inspiring me, motivating me to a great extent, along with my mentor. So I'm very much thankful to Jaydeep Sir and Vasudradi. Thank you very much for inspiring me, and also for bringing together this book launch. I can't thank enough Bhaswati Di. Bhaswati Di, thank you so much for agreeing to uh, to come to this evening. Instead, in fact, you are busy, you are quite busy, but you managed to come for this launch. It means a lot to me. And I don't think I have ever heard anything about my poems the way you talked about them. The poem now sounds something different to me when I'm flipping the pages back and I'm seeing them. They look so different to me now from what I was looking at them earlier. So thank you very much for the insightful uh, words that you have talked, mentioned about the book. It, I think it has inspired me to do something better, maybe in future. And one thing which was motivating me for some time, which I need to tell you, Bhashwati Di, that when I was writing on regular basis and putting it at the social media sites, the first response which I would look forward to was Bhashwati Di. And I'm telling this for the first time. She would always be the first person to respond to tell me about it. And I would feel that this is worth it. And I think I've written something okay, that Bhashwati Di is engaging with it. So it would give me that push that okay, fine, I'll again write. So Bhashwati Di, thank you very much for that invisible support that you were providing me, though you didn't know about it. But yes, you were constantly inspiring. I have been reading your poems for quite some time, although you mentioned that you are no big, you're not into poetry, but we all know, as Basudradi mentioned, that you have been, invisibly mentoring a lot of us and, new people. So I was reading you, you were inspiring me, and I was writing because of that as well. It was you, it was Shumanadi, these people who are constantly making me think about different ways of expressing in verse. So I just didn't want to write about my personal emotions all the time. When I started writing, my mentor was mentioning this to me again and again, that about the voice which I was using. So he used to be the sound in my head who would tell me, this is what you are doing, okay, this is what you're writing, okay, and then I would listen to it, and then I will understand, okay, yes. So now when I go back to my first book, I feel like forgetting it. I want to erase it. I don't want to remember it. I feel that I was quite immature when I was writing those poems, but then I can't erase them because that is my journey. That is how I started, and I think they should be there. They should tell my story, that this is how I started. I was immature. I was writing kiddish, and then slowly and gradually things changed, maybe. So yeah. I think these things were working for me. That I was reading new poets, and I was thinking of things beyond me, beyond my personal uh, peripheries. So until my first book was Deluges, which was too personal. Then my second book was Unbangled, which was again personal. And then I wrote Parvati the Traitor. So after Parvati the Traitor, all my anger within it came out, like, and then I was like free. I didn't have anything, any anger in me after that. So I was carrying a lot of anger inside me, which were reflecting in my poems. And my seniors, my poet friends, they would tell me that, oh my God, we are getting scared of you. You are becoming that, fierce, feminist, angry young woman, uh, with whom we should be scared. So that made me think, am I becoming too aggressive in my poems? Do I need to do something about that? Or I don't need to do anything about it? And then after a lot of thoughts, I realized that maybe this is not the only way of expressing things. I need to explore more ways of expressing things. I need to bring down more metaphors, more images, etc., to reflect, or or to uh, express myself. There are better ways of expression. So after Parvati the Traitor, which had a lot of anger, I came out of it, and then I started writing different kinds of poems. And that is the reason this book took a long time. So Parvati was published in sometimes in 2018, and it's 2022. So a long gap. All this while I was writing slowly and gradually. In between, a lot of issues happened. Medical issues happened in my family. My father was struggling with cancer, and that was impacting me as a person. It has impacted me as a person. So in these few years, I lost my father, I lost my grandmother. That is why the Bhasha Didi, you have very rightly mentioned the front page of the book, which the dedication page of my book is for my papa and my dadi amma, and these two people have been the essential feminists of my life. They have made me the kind of person I am, the way I think. Uh, so so these personal things were also making me think in a certain way. And what I realized about myself, that earlier I used to be a hurried poet. I would want to write something quickly and I would want to get done with it. What has changed in me, that I am not in a hurry anymore, and I'm taking time. I'm not forcing myself to write every day. I want to, but I'm not forcing myself. I'm just taking time. I'm just making sure that I just don't scribble anything and then put it out there. And when I see it back, it doesn't mean anything to me. So I'm just taking time, trying to live with the poems, and try to let them grow within me, and then I'm jotting them down on paper. So that is how I have changed as a poet. Another thing which I would like to share is that uh, translation has impacted me as a poet to a great extent. In fact, it all started because of translation. I have mentioned in one of my social media posts recently that when I was translating Professor R.K. Singh's poems in 2011 during my MPhil at ISM, his poems were in English, and I had to translate them into Hindi, and then I had to do my MPhil dissertation around that. So during those translations, what I realized that when I was translating, I was also mistranslating. So while I was mistranslating, my mentors would tell me, well, this is not a translation. You have written something at your own. This is a poem. This is not a translation. It can't be a translation. And then slowly and gradually, I accidentally realized that, okay, fine. I think I can write some poems. And then I started exploring writing poems, and that is how slowly and gradually it happened. And I've always loved translating, and that is why translation has been my first love. I have been translating for many years now, and it gives me a strange kind of satisfaction when I translate. Recently, I have translated few poems of Basudra Di as well, and I will share them very soon with all of you. And there are some amazing poems that she has written, and I have translated them into Hindi. So yeah, translation has helped me a lot in writing. The important reason behind it is that when we are reading good poems, they make us understand the way poetry works. That is the closest reading one can do through translation, right? And that is why it helped me in understanding the nuances of poetry, the way we can express ourselves in verses, etc. Right? So yeah, I so translation has definitely helped me as a poet, and that is why there are some references about translation as well, though in a different way. It is up to the readers how do they perceive the poems, the way they are there. I'm thankful towards Bhaswati Di. Thank you so much, Bhaswati Di, for putting up all the beautiful words that you have expressed about this book. I'm thankful to Himanshu sir, who has been my mentor since my PG days. He has been like, breaking his head, over me, trying to make me a better person. I can't thank Ravi Shankar sir enough. Ravi Shankar sir, thank you so much. He keeps unwell and still he managed to come online and do this session for me. Thank you very much, sir. It means a lot. Uh, I wish to thank Zindagi Di Richa, who have joined, who would be speaking next, and some of my dear friends. And I also have some seniors, some my teachers, my I think some colleagues as well are there. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And I think it's 8:42 already, Basuti. I think we should move ahead with the next segment. Otherwise, we would end up staying here till midnight. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Varsha. It was great to, listen to you, to listen to your journey. Bhaswati Di runs a column called Literary Wanderings. So that was Varsha talking about her literary wanderings. Uh, and yes, these virtual connections, they're so priceless. And when Varsha said that, a comment or a reaction, from well-established poet can mean a lot, to writers who are struggling out there. And I think, that's what is even accepted in poetry criticism. Academic criticism about poetry does not go a long way in promoting poetry in India. It is through reviews done by established poets, perhaps that new writing can find a space. So we are very grateful to mentors like Jaydeep sir, Bhaswati Di, Ravi Shankar sir, Himanshu sir, who are continuously, they make time for invisible people like us. So thank you very much for being there, for being part of the session. And we look forward to an equally wonderful panel of readings. We have friends, we have students, we have colleagues, all of whom are collaborating for this grand reading session from Varsha's countryside. So without, a lot of ado about introductions, I will begin with Ghanishtha, who is a colleague and also, I think, a student of Varsha's. So Ghanishtha, over to you for your readings from the book.
Thank you, ma'am. So, the poem that I'm going to read is Moonlight, page number 43. Doesn't look like the country I was born, where birds were free as dreams, where dreams were unalloyed as dew, where love was sole religion, where care was nocturnal medicine, where respect was earned, not tamed, where hope was mightiest. But now there is no hope to be hopeful, for hope has lost its way, humanity has lost its religion, dreams have turned frightful, and birds are burning red. Love has lost its reason, like many moonlights ago, and it lost its way and met an accidental creature, converting it to bestiality and the becoming of man. There is no place to hide, for the beast has placed its progeny everywhere, even beside the clock arms. When they shout, tick tock, like the accident, tick tock, like the accidental creature from the past, they scare the dreams of my offsprings and crave to convert them like many moonlights ago. So this is Moonlight from the collection Countryside. Now there is one more poem that I want to read. It's a self-written poem and the title is I Am You. When they were fighting hard for peace, liberty and unity, walking on roads, shouting out their throats, assembling and sitting on grounds, wearing colorful hijabs, singing and enlightening the crowd, drawing cartoons on path you walk, painting the walls, reciting poems with heart, distributing red roses, going to authority for peaceful hearing as if to muses. My children were standing strong as rock against the tear gases, hiding all their bruises. Power showing its power, did its best to suppress my children's voices. They sent goons to hostel rooms, attacked flowering faces and voices, developing in my ideological wound. Head to toe, my children were bleeding, and still my warriors were fighting for me and you. They tried to defame women sitting respectfully on grounds, calling them prostitutes and becow. But to their shock, after all their useless tries, my beautiful soldiers were taking delight in biryani, served by sensible tribe, failing the conspiracy of brainless human bombs. When my children of different universities collectively rebelled against injustice happening in capital city, they were like fire in the forest, becoming new prey of injured lion. They were beaten and detained by people wearing khaki vardi, now stained by bleeding democracy, result of their hypocrisy. News channels and social media, day and night were channeling seeds of hatred, calling my personal stars leftist, Maoist, urban Naxal, Tukre Tukre gang, and you better know what not. Strategically, they blamed my voice, hidden in my children's appeal, the reason for the crack in my unity. The, they built statue of unity, but the crown of my head one fine day, no one knows for how long, was quarantined under the surveillance of military troops. Part of me was given as a part of me as a cube of cheese was given in the name of long dead ram to chauvinists, whereas many of my children still sleep in streets, die of hunger, and are deprived of educational and medical facilities. Please stop. You all are torturing me. I'm no longer the bird who used to freely sing. I'm heading towards slow death due to the poison you are letting them spill among you. No, you are wrong. I'm not talking about my children who are doing their part plastering fractured democracy, but it is you people sitting on the sofas of your drawing room, watching news channels, watching news, eating pakoras, and doing nothing, and still brave enough to comment. What's happening in the country is sad. We are heading towards. Please do something. I'm about to die. Save me by not sitting quiet in the company of ignorance and hatred they are supplying. Because I'm not merely a dream of your forefathers, I'm vision. I'm past, present, and future. I'm India. I'm you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghanishtha, for reading such a wonderful poem from Countryside and also for your own beautiful poem. Thank you for joining us, for adding charm to our evening. Wonderful. From Ghanishtha, we will move over to Zindagi. Uh, Jindagi Kumari is assistant professor at Maharaja Surajmal Institute of Technology, New Delhi. She completed her PhD in Indian English poetry from Indian School of Mines, Dhanbad. Zindagi is a bilingual poet and writer herself. She writes wonderful poetry in English and Hindi, as also short stories in English, and she has worked extensively in the field of poetry and creative fiction. Zindagi, I know it must be difficult to find time for us. She is a mother to, a newly arrived baby in the world, and she needs all the care and time for devoting to this new angel. But we are so grateful that she could make time for us. Thank you, Zindagi, for being here, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and my apologies for not being well connected. I said good evening to all of you, and I say it again because I was not heard earlier. So good evening to all of you, and many congratulations to Varsha. And I would before I start reading the few poems that I have selected, although I loved many poems in the book, but I will read a few of them. I would like to say a few things because in during 2011-12, when I was doing my PhD, I was about to finish my PhD at Indian School of Mines. Varsha was doing her MPhil there, and she was doing her dissertation in translation, and like we would have weekly or um, you know bi-monthly presentations, departmental presentations, and in those presentations she would be the one, like among rare students who would ask very different questions, or who would have very different things to say about a particular section in somebody else's presentation, and we would like, you know uh, she thinks very differently, from the group. So now I can connect why she would say those things and why she was so different in her thoughts, because her journey has really been very inspiring. Her prolificity, the seriousness with which she engages with poetry, and book after book, and like she has really evolved as a poet and as a person, both. And for me to see her grow like that is like really very inspiring. And again, I would like to congratulate her on her new book, Countryside, and the few poems that I connected very deeply with. One of them is, I think it's on page 30, Turning Cacti. So here I would start reading it. Healing is sliding inwards. It fetches not a trip of comfort in heat of sun, which rides on back daily, adding its mark of agonizing glory. That mark which you see is external, like a smoked fabric on skeleton. There is no pain, no prickle, no sting of heat. Interregnum. When all is burnt, a thing longs to live, turns in heart, mind, and soul into cacti. The next one is poetry, page 26. It's not that I'm thoughtless, voiceless. There is stampede of thoughts, restless, and who wants to be lost? I want to remain the parenthesis, enter the world as an afterthought, not breathless. Self-translation is another poem that I would read here. It's on page 60. Quivers within her core remain untranslated. Arithmetics of language remain beyond her spell. Like the age-old tradition which awaits for daily sunrise, sitting near its sill. A translator of her own tongue is what she needs, maybe, to keep the fact nearly and not against her will. Another poem that I loved enjoyed reading is Smelling Life. It's on page 32. Breathe in, out. The pores are too clogged to feel or have goosebumps. The sailor who rowed his boat in sweat now rose in stream of blood and phlegm, which thickens daily. He knows a way, but is weak and frail, like his slowing boat, to breathe in, out. He rows and rows till slips nowhere and sleeps in scent of tired limbs. Until a child plunges, Baba, Baba, he smells life. Yellowing is another poem that I have chosen for the reading. Page 35 it is on. Lazy thirst of uncloaking myths, which walk past sunset, hiding its secret like the fisherwoman, who keeps her hard-earned coins tied twice, thrice firmly in a slight piece of mesh, damp in her sweat, while homewards, when it's time to unravel along with the moistened smell, it exhales conundrums of unkempt stories, buried within creases of softly sulking skin. So I, like many people who commented on Countryside, reviewed it, analyzed it, many respectable panelists, I see a lot of experimentation in this new collection, and the way she uses words in her own way, asserting herself, is something I have noted. Like I think I read one of her previous collections, and I can really see that there is a lot of shift and transition, so far as the form and the style of the poems and expressions are concerned. So that is all. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be among all of you. And this is really an honor for me to be reading Varsha's poems. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Zindagi, for allowing your voice to add new meaning to these poems. Thank you for being with us. As I said, as a new mother, your time is very, very precious, and we value it highly. So our joy in the reading is doubled by your presence. Thank you very much. From Zindagi, we move over to Richa. Richa teaches at Patna Women's College, Patna. She is a poet. She is also a bilingual poet, writer, critic, a very strong and staunch feminist who practices feminism from writing onto her cultural activities, the various cultural practices that she takes up in and out of the classroom to transmit ideas to her students academically and otherwise is something that we all appreciate. We are very happy, Richa, that you could make it to be with us this evening, and we look forward to your reading. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Basudhara, for that address. And congratulations, Varsha, for this wonderful book that you have launched. And after listening to so many people, it is very difficult to speak. And also it gives us a lot of ideas, to talk about. So first of all, I would like to comment on the title of this book, that is Countryside. And this Countryside is a very it's a very deceptive title according to me, because it is not about I wandered lonely as a cloud, like William Wordsworth talking about it, because it is not the countryside which is any romantic countryside. It is not a countryside that is exoticized. It is not a countryside that is this is a countryside which is fully aware of many things around itself. So this is a very changing countryside that you are talking about. This is a countryside which is aware of the injustices in mythologies. She is aware. This countryside is aware of injustices in literature, and she is aware of the failing translator. She is aware of the aging. She is aware of many things. So it's a very aware and new dimension of countryside, which you have talked about. And also the idea that it is not about countryside, rather it is by the countryside that I would perceive these poems to be. So that is how I perceive it. It is not looking at countryside as an escape. It is not looking at countryside as an escape for some relief. Rather, it is looking at countryside which seeks translation. So that is how I perceived two of your poems, that is self-translation and failing translation. So I think it is not about, I mean, I don't know, although Vasudhara said that the poet doesn't die, and I also want the poet to live long, but I would like to comment only as a reader of the poem, and I would like to write as a reader, of these two poems, where I perceive these two poems as very complementary to each other. One is failing translator and the other one is self-translation, which I perceive as translation of the self, that is of countryside. It may be about Varsha, it may be about another woman, it may be about anybody who is failing as a translator. But I would see it as a failure of that translation that the countryside seeks. So I would like to read these two poems. That failing translator. He fails miserably, and I would disagree with Himanshu sir, and I would say that here it has to be he who fails miserably daily, for he can't translate the broken notes which fall from the bosom of tightly knit cords of his muse. Restless translator returns every moment to hold the extra mundane sounds in another tongue, but they turn back to their original self with each shift of any other tongue. So I think that it is not about the person who is translating as a translator, as an active person who is translating. Rather, it is about the person who wants to be translated. Not the person who wants to be translated, but anything around us, the minuteness that she has tried to talk about through talking about perforation, or through talking about the minute ideas, the difference between hollowness and emptiness. So the translation that this countryside seeks, or the person seeks, that is what any he translator could not translate. Perhaps that is how I feel. And here, connected to it, although there's one poem in between these two poems, I don't know why, but these two poems are very much complementary to each other. Here, self-translation quivers within the her core, remain untranslated. Arithmetic of language remain beyond her spell, like the age-old tradition which awaits for daily sunrise, sitting near its sill. A translator of her own tongue is what she needs, maybe, to keep the facts nearly and not against her will. So that is what I perceive, that the things that she tried to translate in her poems, because as in one of her talks, Vasudharati was talking about a woman poet who is not talking always about herself. She is a persona who talks about various selves. So here I can see that she is at times talking about herself, and at times relating herself to all those uncelebrated river that she tries to talk about. So it is a countryside of uncelebrated river. It is a countryside of of awareness. It's a countryside which is aware of democracy, and it's not the countryside which is celebrating woman as Lakshmi, rather which is talking about woman as Chinnamasta, and who is aware of hunger, who is aware of like how somebody could die saying bhat bhat bhat, and then that is what turns this Chinnamasta very angry, which is very genuine anger that she has. So this is, I think, a countryside of dissent, and I would like to end by reading this poem, Goddess of Dissent, that she would worship the headless deity Chinnamasta, who would cleave her head, self-sacrifice, to feed the hungry, for food was passe. Bhat, 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 she cried. But no, her Adhar, her foundation, was not identified. She wished to sacrifice self to feed her plight, but no, that wasn't enough. She ran homewards 50 miles, crouched at 42, and fell in hands of bones more hungry for her than her. Morning news anchor announced breaking news. Now Himalayas can be seen from Malabar. So I think that this is, although she says that she has now she's free from her anger, but Varsha, I could see that anger very much inside you, anger not to find justice in this world. I think that is how I can perceive another woman from the countryside. I know how you would perceive reality around you. So with this, I would like to congratulate you again, and thank you so much for bringing this countryside poems to us, and many more poems to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richa, for so finely pointing out the various nuances of the title. And Richa very rightfully says that and she rightfully points out why reader response is necessary and why it will never fade as a mode of reading. So when she says that Varsha is still angry, I think I will choose to go with the reader than with the writer herself. So thank you, Richa, for especially pointing out to the and relating the idea of countryside with obscurity and with invisibility, which are also themes that I have perceived in this collection of poems. So somewhere Varsha is, talking about the idea of invisibility, about the idea of this being this unseen, being unseen, and how an entire population and entire groups of people can be politically, emotionally, culturally unseen. So this is a countryside, as you very rightly point out, which is very aware of its position and aware of where it stands, which is what we want all countrysides to be. Thank you very much, Richa, for deliberating on the title and of course reading these two beautiful poems. We move over to Srishty. Srishty Singh is a student of literature. She has also been writing for quite a while. And I know her because she has been one of Varsha's very loved students. So thank you, Srishty, for joining us to celebrate countryside today. And over to you for your readings.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It feels so great to be a part of this evening, and a very pleasant evening from my side to all the phenomenal poets, teachers, seniors present here, and a very big congratulations to our beloved teacher for this beautiful collection of poems. So I would like to read two poems from the book. The first is Windows on page number 25. Windows. I see from my window there's a hollow. But don't windows have hollow? Then why do they curse me? Your window has a hollow. I wonder, the meaning of hollowness might differ for me from them. Air comes in, goes out. Sun enters, blushes down. There's a space, unlike empty. It embraces, molds in everything that's transparent like air, water innocence. It's quiet like serenity. It's unlike dull, risible. It can go far away, catch air in its pocket, jump off the cacophony, pick rivulets of water, breathe in sun, breathe out moon. I still see from my window there's a hollow, unlike empty. And the second poem is Caterpillar Existence. It's on page number 40. Caterpillar Existence. It reminds me of the last rain-soaked mountain I visited as a child, with no hopes, no desires to achieve, just the path which made love to my existence. That's when existence came into being, like a caterpillar which ends up becoming a butterfly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Srishti, for that wonderful reading and very related poems that you chose to read. Thank you very much for, for letting us see these associations that are visible to you as readers. Thank you very much. We move over next to Sonali. Sonali is a poet, a writer based in Kolkata, but then since she's always traveling, I believe Sonali is from everywhere. She is an animal lover. She's a fiction writer. She writes travelogues. She also writes poems, and she has probably been the first reviewer of countryside. So Sonali, we are very grateful to have you join us this evening, and over to you for your readings. You have to unmute, Sonali. Sonali, you have to unmute, yes.
Yes. Good evening to Vasu, Varsha, Richa, and everybody, and Ghanishtha and Srishty, everybody. I managed some time from my back-to-back meeting only to stay in this inauguration launch of Varsha's new book, Countryside, which is very close to me, and so many poems are there. It was very hard to select which one should read and which one to left. So here my couple of poems I selected, and from there I am starting my first poem from Varsha's Countryside. Well, this poem is Where's Dawn? Page number 36. While we struggle in the quietest pitch to look for hope, nothing looks like dawn incoming soon. While my neighborhood aunties talk from balconies about their floral nighties, who once had told me not to come back late, a woman gets raped by a virus while carrying another within, and nothing looks like dawn is coming soon. While they try to reach their homes, walking slow fast, then drag themselves homewards, some collapse, some touch the boundaries of living or living, only to see the uncertain night all round, and nothing looks like dawn is coming soon. Is it the death of the dawn, or a new birth is waiting? Maybe in the meanwhile we all struggle. Here the reference Varsha used, and the reference is a woman got raped in Gaya, and we all know the incident while she was at the isolation center. So Corona took time to kill her, so she was raped and she took lesser time to die. And this is very sensitive poem to me, and I choose the first one to this poem, and I will go to the next one. It's a poem, Smelling Life. This is also a very challenging poem to me. Breathe in, out, the ports are too clogged to fill or have goosebumps. The sailor who rowed his boat in sweat now rows in stream of blood and film, which thickens daily. He knows a way, but is weak and frail, like his flowing boat to breathe in, out. He rows and rows till slips nowhere, and sleeps in scent of tired limbs, until a child plunges, Baba, Baba, he smells like. This is very much to learn and much to think about this poem, I think. I didn't though mention in my review, and some related poems I mentioned here is that with her adroit style and distinctive shape and exclusive elegance, when she presented each poem in absolute amazing imageries and their sheer brilliant presentation of unique short span. Yes, I didn't read her earlier poems, earlier books, but this is full of what we call, full of metaphors and much imageries, and she introduced such poem in her this Countryside, that to be thought, that to be think once again and again and again. That is half a poem, the poem named Half. She wrote, footprints walk ahead, shredding skin inch by inch. Eclipse. In these 4 lines, she told everything. In just 4 lines, she told everything. I went on reading her magnanimous style, and another poem is there. There is a poem, Hope. This poem She has an introduction of Oscar Wilde, veil after veil of thin dusky gauze in lifted, and by degrees the forms and colors of things are restored to them, and we watch the dawn remaking the world in its antique pattern. So, I think this is what she presented, these lines of Oscar Wilde in her poem. While we struggle in the quietest speech to look for hope, nothing looks like dawn is coming soon. This is a hope. Again and again, this hope, this poem haunted me again and again. And just linked to this poem, I was stunned to read this poem, that is piling up. Here, these three parts are there, and with three lines. Each part has three lines, that is fallen, ashed, and smitten. So in fallen she writes, counting memories, mind fails to segregate. Emotions pile up over the bedhead. In ashed portion she wrote, dreams turn frozen, eyes stoned as rock. Heart is a dream catcher. Absolute brilliant imageries she used. And here in smitten, she wrote, sharp twinge in heart, pleasure takes over pain, smitten by a firefly, emotions keep piling. So beautifully she put, and while I was reading all these poems, I was much confused to write any review in which poems I should mention. So many poems are there she wrote, and full of so very amazing and outstanding imageries she used. It's to be mentioned with dignity that she has this capacity already in her own. Another poem. Thank you, Varsha. Another poem I am going to read, that is Moonlight. Doesn't look like the country I was born, where birds were free as dreams, where dreams were unalloyed as dew, where love was sole religion, where care was nocturnal medicine, where respect was earned, not tamed. This line, where respect was earned, not tamed, where hope was mightiest, but now there's no reason to be hopeful, for hope has lost its way. Humanity has lost its religion. Dreams have turned frightful, and birds are burning away. Love has lost its reason, like many moonlights ago. An ape lost its way and made an accidental preacher, converting to it bestially, the becoming of man. Yes, of course, she wrote the absolutely correct line, converting it to bestiality and the becoming of man. There is no place to hide, for the beast has placed its progeny everywhere, even beside the clock arms. When they shout tick-tock, like the accidental preacher from past, they scare the dreams of my offspring and crave to convert them, like many moonlights go. So beautiful poem this is. I must thank Varsha to write this book, Countryside, and again I will encourage her to write some more poems and to publish more poems like this. Thank you, Varsha. Thank you, Vasudhara. I am very glad to be with all of you. Thank you. Okay, I am listening. Okay.
Thank you, Sonali, for that, very perceptive reading of Varsha's poems and for pointing out, points that we might have missed. And thank you also. Yes, we are meeting many people virtually also for the first time. So though Facebook is virtual and this too is virtual, there is more warmth in being able to listen to one another. Thank you very much, Sonali, for being here with us this evening. We move over next to Surabhi Kashyap. Surabhi also is known to me as Varsha's student. And of course, these have all passed and they are all doing, they are building wonderful literary careers of their own. They are writing wonderfully. So they are known to me, from a long time. And of course, they are students no more and they are colleagues in their own right in this world. So thank you, Surabhi, for celebrating Countryside with us today. And over to you for your poems.
Thank you for inviting me, ma'am. Congratulations, Varsha, ma'am. So I would read the poem, which is on page 38, Time. They are gone. I see their backs, bathed in bloodiness, while they chant hymns of goodness, of godliness. They have left their scriptures behind, with sagas of slaughtered humanity for their offsprings. I hang in between, like clouds floating between earth and sky. I see them coming, the offsprings of Kalyug, bathed in bloodiness, chanting hymns of godliness, to leave their wanton tyranny behind. And I keep hanging in between for yet another wreck. I am time. मैं समय हूँ. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Surabhi, for that very, very tender reading. Thank you very much. And we move over to our last poet for the day, that is Swarnim Day. Swarnim, we are very glad and grateful to have you. And over to you for your reading of Countryside.
Thank you, ma'am, for the introduction, and I'm glad that I got a chance to recite on the launch day. Thank you. The first poem I'm going to read is Coaching, page 46. Half eyes crib call. Classroom such a waste of time. Throw some pennies, get all mind. Why teach poetry? What's left in rhyme? They better sit back, cook or dine, while being tamed in sunshine. What will they do at all with a peace of mind? They are meant for mediocrity and not sublime. The second poem is Leaf, page 61. Fallen from tree, apart, still a part of its identity. Thank you.
Swarnim,
Hello.
am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Swarnim. Sorry, I could not, connect. Thank you very much for that beautiful reading, and it's such a pleasure to, have so many young poets writing, and we hope to be celebrating you people in the days to come. So all of you are doing wonderfully, and I'm fortunate to be connected with a few of them on social media, and I see them coming up with brilliant pieces of their own. Thank you, Varsha, for mentoring, your students and for adding to this, vast circle that we share of Indian English poetry.
Yes, it is.
Thank-
It is indeed. Indeed, this is a great, great meet with all the students of Varsha, and they are very promising, I think.
Varsha, Richa, Jindagi, all of them, are constantly mentoring and motivating their students to come out creatively, which is very rare in the academic world. We have had our own sets of teachers, and not many teachers have really pushed us on to creativity. So it's great to see, such academicians, and of course, to have the opportunity to be friends with them. So thank you for a very, very wonderful session. We are very grateful to the panelists, to Bhaswati Di, to Ravi Shanker sir, to Himanshu sir. Bhaswati Di, it has been a long time for you, and we're very thankful that you managed to stay with us till the end of it. Thank you very much. We are very grateful to the poets who read, who forwarded their opinions. So Zindagi, Richa, Sonali, Swarnim, Srishty, Ghanishtha, all of you, you have added many layers, because when you read a poem, the process of reading, it's a performative act where you are making meaning on the go, and the places where you pause and the places where you, change your intonations. So I believe that a poem is a vessel, and when you read it, it fills with meaning. So thank you for adding these many layered meanings in your voices. Thank you very much. This has been a long session, and I believe the success of a session is that it always spills.
And a very special
over.
thank you to you, Basu, for total management and all
No,
through
I'm
this.
grateful because though I and Varsha, both of us live in Jharkhand, we are still separated by a distance of around 5 hours. She lives in Dhanbad. I live in Jamshedpur. So it takes around 5 to 5.5 hours to travel from one place to another. So I'm very grateful that I'm able to be a part of this online
Yes,
without
of course
having
I
to
am. Of
travel,
course
because
I
I
am
have
too.
kids and it becomes
Of
very
course I am
difficult
too.
to travel. So I'm really very grateful to each one of you who managed to, be a part of this session to add more meaning to it. And we wish Varsha Singh and we wish Countryside a grand poetic
Yes.
journey. Thank you very much for being with us. And good night to everybody from the Hearth
Thank you.
Within. We are more than grateful that we were amidst such wonderful company. Thank you very much. So I'll just stop.